Hi guys, this is Matt Granger, that Nikon guy for mattgranger.com. Now today is part 6 of our How to Shoot a Wedding series. This is also a viewer-based section. I'm going to be looking at the camera settings that I use when I'm shooting a wedding. Now this is a personal preference. If you're getting started, then what I suggest may be really useful for you, but if you've been doing this for a while, you'll probably have a way that you like to work all set up. And so I'm certainly not saying that this is the right way or the best way to do it. It's just what works for me, and it helps me avoid some common little mistakes that you can make, which when you're tight for time and under pressure on the day, going your way through the menu to fix it up then and there can be a pain. So having it set up before you head out can be really useful. So I'll just step you through a couple of the different custom settings that I set before I go out on a wedding shoot. Okay, so taking a look at the top of the camera, I pretty much always shoot in aperture priority. When I say pretty much, actually I mean always. I always shoot in aperture priority at weddings. If you're doing some creative things with capturing movement or trying to isolate movement in a shot, then shutter priority can be handy. I never use program, and I really only use manual mode when I'm shooting strobist work. So for weddings, I just set it in aperture priority. Then if I want to overexpose the shot, I'll put my exposure compensation up, or vice versa down. Now I also always shoot in RAW mode, so for that you're just setting the quality on the side here and scroll through to RAW. Now I don't do JPEG as well. When I'm using a twin card system I do, because then I can have one recorded to each, but otherwise it's not necessary. Then depending on what part of the day it is, I'll have it set in continuous low or high. For important times I'll have it in high just so I can run off a bunch of frames without having to worry about missing one. And ISO, I'll show you how I have that set in just a moment. Okay, so after putting it into aperture priority, I will normally pop it on a single focal point. Let's pop up the live view so you can see what I mean. Okay, so you can see that floating dot. I always put it on the central dot. I find that it's the quickest and the strongest point for finding it. So I'll move that to whatever I want to focus on and then recompose my shot. So I put that on single focal point. I use the full zone metering you'll see up here. That's the middle setting, so it's evaluating the whole scene. And then I set mine by going into menu. I have this set up as my menu item, but it's in the deeper menu if you don't have it set there. But I have set my picture control to monochrome. Now you've got a few different options there. I find that monochrome is easier to view the shadow and light detail in a shot, which when you're working quickly and you want to see you've got something right, I find that handy. So let's just take a boring shot of whatever's in front of me. And I'll put the histogram on. Now there's a lot of misconceptions about how a histogram, what it should look like, or the ideal histogram. I think it's nonsense. It really depends what you're shooting. There is no ideal histogram. What's on the left of the shot, that's your darks, your blacks, and on the far that's your lights, your whites. So you can see here there's a little gap here, so I don't have any perfect blacks, but I do have a little bit of perfect white in the scene. And it really depends what you're shooting. If you were shooting a black cat on a white rug and there was only those extremes, or a very pale nude person sitting on a black rug, then you're going to have a big clump up this end and a big clump up this end and nothing in the middle. Lots of blacks, lots of whites, and that's how it should look. So you need to look at the histogram considering the shot you're trying to create. If you're trying to make a high key shot but it's mostly midtones and darks, then you haven't really nailed it. Okay, now one thing that's really important to set up is your flash sync speed. There's no point being out and having your flash sync speed too low if you're going to be shooting with a fast lens at daytime with a flash. For example, if you want to shoot at f2 in the middle of the day, but your camera's limited with flash to 1/200th or 1/250th of a second, it's just not going to work before the flash is even adding light to the scene. So go into menu, and this is in bracketing and flash. Go in, up here at E1, and then you have a range of different settings. So the D700 lets you sync it 1/250th and further down. I think some of the Canons, including the 5D, maybe sync at 1/200th. But if you're using a compatible flash, which I've got set up here, you can have autofocal plane. So that basically means it'll sync the flash at any speed up to and including 1/8000th of a second, I believe. So it's basically putting pops of light, you can see my hand in the reflection, pop, 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 through the frame so that it captures it all the way through at such a high speed, and you need that basically on the day. Otherwise you're going to be getting these really overexposed shots and not understand why, and then potentially miss something because you're busy trying to fix the settings. Okay, another little handy thing that I like to have on is in autofocus. Focus point wraparound, I set it to on, so then if I'm going across the screen it'll come back around to the other side and start again. So if I want to go from here to here I don't have to tab all the way, it's just one button to the left, brings it back right to the right. Another thing which is totally personal preference, I have my ISO and compensation steps all in third instead of half stops. I find that that is handy for me, it gives you finer control. Now this is something that definitely divides people. Personally, I like to have ISO auto sensitivity on, especially if you're using a camera like the D700 where using high ISO really doesn't cause a lot of degradation up to a certain point. So going into there, you set your base ISO, which I have at the normal, which is 200. Then I have sensitivity control on. Maximum, I let it go all the way up to 3200, not all the way up to what it will allow. I find up to 3200 it's salvageable and I can use it, maybe not as clean as 800, but you know, if it means getting the shot or not, then that's fine. And minimum shutter speed, now there's a good old rule of thumb that says if you're shooting at 200mm, you want at least 1/200th of a second for your exposure. The way I shoot in weddings, I find that's not an issue. I'm not shooting a lot of fast moving things, as I explained why I use aperture priority, and 1/60th of a second is pretty much fine for capturing normal people movements at an event like that without them getting blurry. Then I'll be using my 50mm, 85mm and 70-200 and all of those I can handhold at 1/60th. So even the 70-200 with its great VR, if I have it set to on and I'm at 200mm, 1/60th of a second is no problem. But if you're not sure, you may want to put it a little bit higher depending on the lenses you're going to be using. Okay, one little thing which isn't a big one, but if you're using a grip, I will set the battery order to use the grip battery first and then use the camera. That's only because it's easier for me to get the battery out of the grip without having to take the grip off to then get into the battery that's inside. So that's just how I set it. So then if that one dies and I'm running off the body battery, I can take the battery out of the grip. See, it's not even there at the moment, it's on the charge. Put it in the charge and then the grip buttons will still work. So you can see that's still working even though I don't have grip battery in there. So that's the reason that I do it. Now, people have different opinions on this, but I find that this is a good thing to have off. If you go down into menu F, controls, down to F10, F11, no memory card. I set that to lock, which means if you don't have a memory card in there, if you don't set that to off, your camera will still let you take shots and just store them in the temporary memory for a couple of seconds or until you turn it off, which I think you don't want. Whereas if you have it set to off, which I just said, pushing the button, it won't take a shot. You can see I'm pushing both those buttons, it won't take a shot. So if you accidentally forget to put a card back in after you fill up a card on the wedding and you switch it out with a new one, but you forget to put the new one in, it won't let you take a shot. So you can't think you're shooting and then find you've actually missed the shot. Okay, so the same goes with your flash. If I always say want to keep the scene pretty much at the normal exposure without compensating, but I want to make the flash itself a little bit brighter within the scene, you can just turn the compensation up there. So say for that big group shot I was shooting, I think I had that at plus 2/3 or plus 1 of a stop. So it was pumping out about double what it would ordinarily, because I really wanted to make sure I was getting in enough light to the people's face. Conversely, if you just want to add a really small touch of light so that you're not adding too much in the front, when you're, say, taking a portrait, you could underexpose with the flash but then still leave your overall exposure that's set by the camera at normal or wherever you want it to be. Okay, but generally when you're shooting, unless you're getting into more advanced stuff, I would suggest that you just have the mode for the flash to be set to TTL focal plane. Focal plane will come out when you set the focal plane setting in the camera. BL means it's also balanced light, to try and give you a balanced exposure through the scene. I personally don't have it on that setting, so that's how I would use the flash. Okay guys, thanks for watching. I hope that was helpful. That was how I set up my camera for the wedding shoot. Now that certainly is not to say that that's the best way to do it. As I said at the start, it's really important that you set up your camera as you like to shoot, and the settings you need to do that will vary. And I think one of the most important things, after being able to interact well with people, one of the most important things you need on a wedding shoot is to be able to act instinctively without having to really think through what you're going to do. So when I'm shooting, I need to know in the back of my mind, these are all the settings that I have currently set on my camera. There's an opportunity for a great shot. Think of how I want the shot to look, quickly make adjustments, change the aperture, change the exposure compensation, change the flash head position if I want to bounce, turn it off if I don't want flash, and then catch the moment before it's gone. You can't ask people to reenact the kiss and say you've got a couple of cute kids playing at the reception. You can't really intervene in that moment and ask them to keep going because you screwed up the camera settings and missed the shot. So I think that's really important. Now, thank you for the viewer who suggested doing this video. I hope that's been helpful for you. Make sure you go out and practice. And another question I had about was how to get into this sort of field. And another question I had was how to approach someone about being an assistant. And I think they tie together really well. How I got into weddings was I asked a couple of wedding photographer friends of mine that I knew were good, that next time they had a wedding coming and the couple wouldn't mind, could they take me along? I worked for free, but really I should have been paying for a lesson. Just watching what they did and observing, taking it all in, getting the shots that I could was really valuable. In the first couple I didn't get great shots for my portfolio really, because the cameraman would take prime position and I'd be standing on the sideline picking out shots. So there weren't a lot of group shots, for example, where the people were looking at me because they were looking at the main photographer. But you do get a good opportunity to catch candids. So I think that's a really handy way to get in. Shoot a bunch of them for free, giving all your images to the photographer for experience. You'll still have them for your portfolio, of course. Then as you work your way up and you have experience, you can assist on weddings and get paid for that. And then eventually take on your own clients once you're really comfortable to do it all by yourself. Heck, if you're in Sydney and you're interested in being an assistant, get in touch with me and we'll see if we can work something out. Especially someone who, whatever their skill level, if they know how to keep out of the way and ask questions at the right time and can add to the situation, why wouldn't you? Okay, so thanks again. Please leave any questions, comments or suggestions below in the comments box. Let us know what settings you use on your camera or how you crack the field so we can all share in the learnings. And stay tuned because I will be doing a how to shoot a concert series coming up soon, as I have a couple of pole dancing competitions to shoot this month. So thank you for watching. This is Matt Granger, that Nikon guy, for mattgranger.com. See you next time.